Marcus Ellis arrived at Fire Station 12 just as the late afternoon sun began to soften the edges of the street. He stepped out of his old pickup truck, his boots clicking on the concrete as he walked toward the bay doors. Marcus was tall and lean, with close-cropped hair turning silver at the sides. He moved with quiet confidence, the kind that comes from 20 years of answering emergency calls and saving lives. Today he planned to finish his routine equipment checks before heading home for dinner with his wife Clara. Inside the station, the air smelled of rubber hoses, metal lockers, and coffee that had gone cold. Marcus paused by his locker, opening it to reveal neatly folded turnout gear, heavy coat and pants that bore the faded emblem of the fire department. He ran a gloved hand over the coat's reflective stripes, making sure they were intact. Then he examined the helmet on the shelf above. The visor was clear and free of cracks. He even tapped the radio clip to his belt to confirm the battery still held a charge. As he worked, he noticed the other firefighters moving around him. One man restocked medical bags on a metal cart. Another polished the chrome rail on Engine 3. Their chatter was low and friendly, punctuated by laughter and the occasional rattle of equipment. Marcus nodded at them as he passed. He had come to rely on these men and women like family. They counted on each other in the worst moments, and each of them knew what good teamwork meant. Across the street, Officer Aaron Blake finished his shift at the Brookside Police Department. Aaron parked his cruiser under a lamppost that stood guard against gathering shadows, stepped out, his uniform crisp and dark blue, the badge on, his chest gleaming in the fading light. In his mid-30s, he held himself stiffly like a soldier on duty. Aaron liked order. He liked rules. He believed danger lurked around every corner, especially in a suburb that had grown more diverse. In recent years, inside the patrol car, Aaron methodically ran a systems check. He tapped at the radio console, adjusted the rearview mirror, and checked the tires. He prided himself on being thorough. Any lapse could cost lives. As he closed the car door, he pulled his notebook from his jacket pocket and jotted down a report from his previous call. A teenager caught spray painting a wall. The ink was still fresh in the notebook when he snapped it shut and stood. Aaron glanced across the street at Fire Station 12. He respected the firefighters, most of whom he knew by name. Marcus Ellis was a good man, or so Aaron had heard. They exchanged brief nods sometimes, though they did not share many words. In Aaron's mind, the world had clear lines. Police officers on one side, firefighters on the other, yet he knew that in emergencies, those lines blurred and everyone worked toward the same goal. A distant alarm pierced the afternoon calm. Marcus and the other firefighters froze for a moment, then moved into action. The station's siren chimed and red lights on Engine 3 began to flash. Marcus closed his locker and sprinted toward the engine bay, his boots thumping against the floor. He grabbed his helmet and tossed it onto his head. His radio crackled with the dispatcher's voice. Structure fire at 234 Elm Street. All units respond. Marcus climbed into the back of the engine, where he sat next to Jenna, a young firefighter who had joined the crew last year. Jenna gave him a quick thumbs up. Marcus returned the gesture, then snapped on his gloves. He could hear the engine roar to life as their captain climbed into the driver's seat. The bay doors lifted, revealing a cloud of smoke rising over the rooftops down the road. Meanwhile, Aaron watched as Engine 3 rolled out of the station. A pang of concern struck him. He tapped his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 42. Any other calls in the area?" Dispatcher replied. "Negative, Unit 42.
Just
That structure fire. Fire units responding now." Aaron hesitated. The fire station lay only 2 blocks away from where he parked. He thought about driving over to check if his neighbors were safe, but instead, he climbed back into his cruiser, switched on the siren, and followed at a distance. The streets of Brookside were quiet. Some residents had paused in their yards, turning to stare as the engine whined around the corner. Marcus drove expertly, weaving through parked cars and slowing at intersections. He peered through the windshield, mentally mapping out the fastest route. His heart rate climbed, not from fear, but from determination. He knew that every second counted once flames touched wood and glass. As they arrived on Elm Street, Thick gray smoke billowed into the sky. Flames ached at the edge of a white two-story house, licking the roof's edge. A small crowd had formed on the sidewalk. A woman stood clutching a cell phone, tears running down her cheeks. A man held a garden hose uselessly in his hand. The fire looked too big for that hose to help. Marcus leapt from the engine, pulling the hose from its reel. Jenna and the others followed, unrolling the heavy line and snapping it onto the hydrant. Marcus turned the valve, and water began to pour into the hose. He sprinted toward the front of the house. Ember sparks landed on the chipped paint of the porch. The heat was intense, even from a distance. Marcus raised the nozzle and aimed a strong stream of water at the base of the flames. Marcus noticed Officer Blake's cruiser pull up beside the fire engine. Blake stepped out, but instead of offering help or calling for traffic control, he remained at the back of his car. Smoke curled around him, and he squinted as if unsure what he saw. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead and turned the nozzle to douse a burning window frame. Suddenly, Blake drew his service weapon. Marcus froze mid-spray, the water jet arcing awkwardly into the air. Firefighters behind him shouted, "He's a firefighter. Put the gun down." But Marcus saw the barrel of the gun pointed straight at him. His chest tightened. He had faced down fires that roared with hunger, collapsed buildings, and raging. Floodwaters, but never a gun aimed at his back while he tried to save lives. The world seemed to slow for Marcus. He dropped the hose nozzle and raised his hands, still dripping with water. His helmet slipped slightly, revealing his worried eyes. The smoke stung them, but it also made the scene surreal. Flames danced, hoses hissed, and a crowd whispered in disbelief. Blake's cruiser siren cut off, leaving only the crackle of fire and the distant wail of the fire engine's pump. Marcus tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. Forced out, I'm with the fire department. He took a cautious step back, feet sliding in wet grass. Other firefighters rushed to cradle the hose and block the view of the gun's muzzle. Jenna whispered, "Marcus, it's okay. We'll handle this." But Marcus's heart pounded so hard, he thought it might break free from his ribs. Officer Blake's eyes were wide behind the brim of his hat. His grip on the pistol was tight. Smoke from the house filtered around his shoulders. Marcus recognized fear in Blake's stance, but it was a fear fueled by something deeper out. Suspicion, prejudice. Marcus felt the sting of betrayal. Here he was, risking everything to help a neighbor, and a fellow first responder saw him as a threat. Yet Marcus did not retaliate. He did not charge. He stood as a silent plea. Water dripped from his gloves, and the embers glowed like angry fireflies. The crowd held its breath, watching the scene unfold like a terrible play. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in a shaky breath, reminding himself to stay calm. He thought of Clara waiting at home, her gentle smile encouraging him every day. He thought of his colleagues trusting him, thought of the family inside that burning house, praying for help. As Marcus lowered his raised hands, the siren on Blake's cruiser started again, a wavering warning that more police cars might come. A young neighbor stepped forward, film phone in hand. The scene was already on social media before it even ended. Marcus glanced briefly at the screen, glowing in the neighbor's hand. It showed him not as a hero but as a target. Frozen moment, Marcus realized that the battle for justice was not only outside in the flames, but also inside people's hearts. He would not let fear extinguish his courage. He took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next, but also ready to show the world who he truly was. A firefighter, dedicated to saving lives, no matter the danger. Behind him, the rest of the crew adjusted the hose to keep fighting the blaze. Blake remained where he stood, gun still drawn, as Marcus braced himself for the next move. The air trembled with tension and heat. In that instant, life hung on a thread much finer than any rope or ladder. And Marcus Ellis, soaked too. The bone and standing in a fire's glow, prepared to prove that fear could be faced and overcome one brave step at a time. Marcus's heart pounded as he stood with his hands raised. Water dripped from his gloves and rolled down his arms in cold rivulets. Smoke swirled around him like gray ghosts. He could taste ash on his tongue. Behind him, the hose hissed as Captain Reynolds and the other firefighters moved to flank him, their hoses trained on the blaze. The fire roared in the living room, sending swirls of orange and red dancing across the window panes. Every instinct in Marcus urged him to act, to get back to fighting the flames. But the barrel of a gun kept him frozen in place. Officer Aaron Blake's finger trembled on the trigger. His face was pale, eyes wide with fear. He had never pointed his weapon at a civilian before. He had never even thought he would. Yet here he was, standing in a driveway with a black man clad in firefighter gear between him and a house in flames. He had seen Marcus Ellis at the station many times, but he had never taken a close look. In the smoke and flickering light, Marcus looked like a stranger. Blake thought he might be a looter, or worse. He thought of news reports about criminals hiding in fires and ambushing rescuers. His mind raced, filling with worst-case scenarios. "Get back," Blake yelled, voice cracking. "Stay right where you are." The words rang hollow. Marcus's back pressed against the wet grass, and he tried to keep his breathing steady. He swallowed hard and let his wet gloves slip down his sleeves. He understood fear. He had felt it every time he cracked open a door into darkness. Every time wood cracked under his boots, and every time a building groaned around him. But this fear was different. This fear could kill. A neighbor, Mrs. Patel, had come out of her home, holding her phone high. She shouted, "He's a firefighter. He's saving lives." Her voice shook with anger and disbelief. Another neighbor joined her, a teenager with a skateboard under his arm. He said quietly to Mrs. Patel, "I recorded the whole thing. People need to see this." Their phones glowed with screens showing Marcus's raised hands and Blake's extended arm. Already, the video was spreading to social media. Marcus felt a flicker of dread. He did not want to be a viral sensation that way, but he also needed help. Captain Reynolds stepped forward from behind the hose. "Officer Blake, this is Firefighter Ellis," he called out. "Put the weapon down. We're here to help." His voice was firm, but calm, the kind of voice that Marcus had heard in countless rescue scenes. Blake's arm wavered, and for a moment it seemed as though he might lower the gun. But his mind kept feeding him doubts. What if these guys were What if someone told him they were firefighters, but really they were criminals? Marcus glanced over his shoulder at the burning house, seeing flames leap through a broken window. He knew lives were at stake inside. He also knew that the man pointing a gun at him was afraid. Marcus did not want to harm him. He wanted to show him his badge and his name tag. He took a slow, careful step forward, his voice softening as he spoke. "Officer Blake, I'm Marcus Ellis. I'm here to help put out the fire. No one is here to hurt you." As Marcus spoke, Blake's arm twitched. His foot tapped on the pavement. The siren on the fire engine grew louder, echoing down the street. Blake's partner's siren beeped twice, a warning that more units were arriving. Blake turned his head briefly toward the sound, blinking as if coming out of a trance. He saw another patrol car turn onto the street, its lights spinning like red and blue wheels of light. He realized that reinforcements were on their way, that soon he would have to explain why he had his gun drawn. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a shaky breath, and opened them again. The smoke burned his eyes, and he blinked through tears. He let his arm drop a fraction, the barrel easing downward. Marcus saw the change and gently lowered his own arms, his gloves dropping from his fingertips into the grass. He stayed still, careful not to make any sudden moves. Jenna, standing beside Marcus, murmured, "That's it. Good job." Blake's breath came in ragged gasps. Swallowed, glancing from Marcus to Captain Reynolds. His eyes landed on Marcus's helmet, on the reflective stripes that spelled out fire department. For anyone who cared to look, that word "dept" should have carried weight. Firefighters were public servants, not criminals. In that moment, Blake realized how wrong he had been. He had let fear and prejudice cloud his judgment. He had almost shot a man who was risking his life to save others. He looked up the street at his partner, Officer Diaz, who jumped out of the patrol car, hand already on her radio. She saw Blake lower his gun and gave him a questioning look. Slipped the weapon back into its holster, his hand shaking as he snapped the latch. He nodded at Diaz and then at Marcus. "I'm sorry," he said, voice thick. Marcus gave a small nod, keeping his eyes on Blake. He did not move yet. The flames still needed fighting. He needed to trust that Blake would not repeat this mistake. "Let's work together," Marcus said quietly. The fire spreading. "To the backyard? We need water on the left side now." This simple command shifted the moment. Blake hesitated, then took a step backward, clearing space around Marcus. The other officers formed a loose ring around the fire crew, directing traffic away from the scene. Marcus snapped the nozzle free and pointed it toward the back of the house. Water arced out in a strong beam, striking the wooden siding below. A second-floor window, Jenna joined him, guiding the hose with steady hands. The fire hissed in response. Steam rising where water met flame. Marcus worked the hose back and forth, moving closer to the heat. The scent of burning wood mixed with the sharp tang of metal from a scorched gutter. He felt the heat on his face, but kept his focus. Flames danced above him, crackling and snapping. He edged the water stream toward the base of the fire, trying to push it back before it could leap onto the roof. Blake stood at the perimeter watching. He felt both relief and shame. Relief that Marcus was safe and fighting the fire. Shame that he had almost harmed a man who did nothing but his duty. He approached Captain Reynolds and offered help, though he knew he could not carry a hose or wear heavy gear. Instead, Captain Reynolds handed him a radio and pointed at a blocked-off street corner. "Help me keep people back here," Reynolds said. "We don't need curious onlookers crowding the scene." Blake nodded and radioed dispatch to ask for barriers. He walked the perimeter, guiding neighbors back to their yards. He watched Marcus and Jenna tackle the flames, and as he did, he saw Marcus's calm determination. He saw how Marcus never flinched, how every movement was sure and practiced. He saw a man who spent his life helping others, facing danger without prejudice. Blake felt a pang of regret so sharp it lodged in his chest. Meanwhile, the fire continued to burn in the back of the house. Sparks drifted up into the sky like glowing insects. Marcus and Jenna edged closer, keeping their eyes on the flashing lights of the engine behind them. Blake stood nearby, ready to radio for more resources if needed. The neighbors watched in silence, some wiping tears, others holding children close. No one moved forward. The memory of the almost tragic mistake held them in place. Marcus trained the hose under a window where flames had licked the sill. The water sizzled, sending steam clouding around him. Every now and then, he glanced over his shoulder at Blake. Blake met his gaze and nodded. No words passed between them, but an understanding formed. They were both human, both trying to do the right thing. Both had been wrong in that moment, but now they worked side by side as the crew gained ground. On the fire, Marcus felt exhaustion wash over him. His arms ached, and sweat mixed with soot in his hair. Yet he pressed on because he knew lives hung in the balance. Blake watched him, and in that tense silence, he made a silent promise. Never again would he let fear stand between him and someone who was simply doing their job. He would learn from this mistake, would face his own biases and become a better officer because of it. By the time the flames began to shrink, the crowd had moved back to a safe distance. The sound of crackling eased into occasional pops. Mackay rotated the hose, soaking hot spots and dampening embers. He worked until the fire engine's pump switched to a steady drip. Finally, he signaled Jenna and Captain Reynolds that the worst was over. The crew cheered softly, proud of their teamwork under pressure. Marcus lowered the hose and took off his helmet. He leaned against the engine, breathing heavily as adrenaline faded. Blake walked over, offering a hand. Marcus took it, gripping firmly. He saw genuine remorse in Blake's eyes. He saw a man ready to change. In that moment, on a street lined with scared neighbors and humming engines, something shifted. It was more than putting out a fire. It was a lesson in trust, in looking beyond fear, and in finding common ground even. When mistakes were made, Marcos and Blake stood together, tired but resolute, as the sun dipped below the rooftops. The fire was not the only thing they had to face that day. They had faced their own fears, and in doing so, they had taken the first step toward understanding each other. Smoke still curled around the charred siding of the Elm Street house when Marcus Ellis paused to drag a deep breath. The fire engine's pump hissed behind him as he and Jenna worked to soak every glowing ember. The sky had turned to bruised, shades of purple with the sun sinking low. Marcus's clothes clung to his body, heavy with water and sweat. He glanced at Officer Aaron Blake, who stood nearby holding the radio, his uniform smeared with soot. Blake's eyes stayed on the burning house. He felt gratitude toward Marcus and the crew for saving his neighbors. He also felt a knot of guilt twisting in his chest. He tried to push it down. He had done his duty as an officer after realizing his mistake, but he knew the breach of trust ran deep. He wanted to make amends, to show respect for the man who had raised his arms when a bullet might have flown. As Marcus stepped back from the hose, Captain Reynolds waved him closer. Marcus jogged over, wiping soot from his face with the back of his glove. "Good job," the captain said in a low voice. "We have the front under control. Can you clear the backyard perimeter? I want to make sure the fire didn't spread." "To the woodshed." Marcus nodded and turned to help two firefighters roll up a spare line. Jenna joined him, and together they crept around the side of the house. The ground was littered with broken glass and yellow caution tape fluttering in the breeze. A few neighbors, still shaken, had retreated to the sidewalk. They watched in silence now, giving space to the crew. Marcus crouched, inspecting the foundation for any smoldering hotspots. Jenna jabbed at charred wood with a wrench, prying away loose boards. Suddenly, Marcus heard a low crack behind him. He stood and saw orange flames licking at the corner of Blake's house next door. His heart jumped. Smoke had already begun to pour from the soffit beneath the roof. The fire looked small, but Marcus knew how quickly a stray spark could turn walls into an inferno. He took a half-step toward Blake's home, but hesitated. He thought of his crew and the house they were still securing.
Ow.
Jenna pointed at the blaze. "Marcus, the next house," she said, voice high. She unhooked her helmet and wiped ash from her brow. Blake stepped forward, his radio forgotten. Marcus saw horror wash across Blake's face. He had not realized his own home was in danger. Blake raised a hand, as if to call out, but had no words. He stared at the flames crackling near his roofline. The ground beneath him felt unsteady. Marcus dropped the hose and ran forward. "Officer Blake," he shouted, voice hoarse. Jenna ran after him. Two other firefighters, drawn by their shout, came around the corner. Blake's legs moved before his mind caught up. He sprinted toward the side yard of his house, ducking under the low branches of a maple tree, reached the backyard fence, and vaulted over it, landing in Blake's neat garden. The smell of burning cedar shingles filled his nostrils. He stumbled, but stayed upright, adrenaline overriding his shock. Marcus and Jenna reached the fence and swung it open. Marcus yelled, "Get back, stay safe." But Blake was already inside, fumbled with his radio, trying to call for help. But his hands shook too much. Marcus climbed over and landed beside him. "We'll help," Marcus said, though the words sounded thin against the roar of growing flames. They both ran toward the side of the house. The fire spread up to a window frame, and its heat stung Marcus's face. He felt an urgent pull, too. Take action, because this time, it was his buddy's home on the line, the man who had nearly pulled the trigger on him. He shook his head. He needed to stay calm. Behind them, firefighters and police officers formed a line, clearing the street and standing ready with equipment. Marcus spun the hose nozzle toward the base of the flames. He'd already switched engines. Another crew had taken Elm Street's blaze. Water cut through the air in a strong arc, struck the burning cedar shakes with a hiss, sending steam into the dusk. Blake crouched beside Marcus, unhooking a small fire extinguisher from the house's exterior. He aimed it at a wall stud and squeezed the handle. White powder sprayed onto the burning wood. The flames shrank, but they still glowed fiercely along the roof's edge.
Ow.
Blake hesitated. He felt exposed, wearing only his uniform shirt and badge, while Marcus towered beside him in full gear. Blake swallowed hard, pride warring with fear. Marcus placed a hand on Blake's shoulder. "Stay low," he said. "The heat's intense." "Up there," he pointed at the roofline. "Water's best for shingles. This extinguisher will slow it, but we need a hose." Blake nodded and handed the extinguisher back to a passing firefighter. He watched Marcus twist the nozzle to increase. Spray then moved back, and shifted the hose between them so Blake could help guide it. The water battered the flames. Marcus felt the vibration in the hose handle. He braced his legs and pressed on. Jenna and 2 other firefighters joined them, creating a small team. Blake gripped the hose with both hands. The water stream steadied. For a moment, all Blake felt was the pressure and the teamwork. He understood how Marcus felt in the station-like part of a unit, each person giving strength to the others. As the fire shrank under the water's attack, Marcus caught a glimpse of movement in the upstairs window. He called out, "Move back, windows." Jenna and Blake retreated just as several panes cracked, sending hot sparks onto the ground. The fire hissed at their intrusion. Marcus held steady, pushing the water higher until the last flame died. They paused, breathing heavily. The house still smoked, but no active flame showed. Marcus tapped Blake's arm. "You're safe now," he said. Blake exhaled, relief flooding him. Looked at Marcus, expression raw. "Thank you," he muttered, voice rough. I should have been here sooner." Marcus shook his head. "You did what you could," he said. "Now we finish this." He turned back to the house and signaled Jenna. They began walking backward, following the hose as it slackened on the grass. Water dripped from the siding like rain on hot pavement. By the time they rejoined the main crew, the fire was under control. The echo of sirens faded as other engines left. A firefighter used a pike pole to remove charred debris. A police unit placed a fire scene do not enter sign at the top of the porch steps. Neighbors watched from across the street. Voices hushed in relief. Blake stood beside Marcus, helmet in hand. He looked around at the scorched walls and the team packing up hoses. He felt gratitude again, but this time it was mixed with humility. He remembered the stiff pride he had carried all afternoon. The rigid lines he had drawn in his mind between who was friend and who was foe. He realized those lines were too simple, too brittle. Marcus clapped Blake on the back. "Come on," he said. "Let's check the front one more time. I want to make sure we haven't left any hot spots." Blake followed, his steps slower now, but steady. He knew he had earned a chance to do right. He would stand by Marcus's side until the job was done. Together, they walked to the front of Blake's house. The porch light flickered as smoke curled around it. The front door was scorched but intact. Marcus taught Blake how to hold the thermal camera, how to sweep it across walls and ceilings for hidden heat. Blake controlled the controls with careful fingers, scanning each corner. When the camera beeped, he called out, and Marcus applied more water until the beep stopped. It took another 15 minutes before they pronounced the house safe. Blake shut off his radio and folded it in his pocket. He turned to Marcus and said, voice steady, "I'm sorry I judged you. I'm sorry I didn't see you as a person first." Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "We all make mistakes. We learn, and we move on." Blake nodded, looking down. At the ground, he swallowed and said softly, "Thank you for saving my home. Thank you for saving my family." Marcus's eyes widened. He had thought wrong only of his life being endangered, not that someone else's home someone who had nearly shot him might have his life ruined too. "No," Marcus said, "we saved it together." He pointed at the fire engine approaching, ready to refill hoses. "Let's head back to the station. We've earned a break." Blake smiled. The first genuine smile since his shock. He followed Marcus to the engine, walking side by side. As the engine pulled away, Blake climbed into the passenger seat. He watched the charred remains of his home recede in the glow of after-dark streetlights. He thought of Clara, waiting inside, safe on her side of the house. He thought of the trust he would now build with Marcus, and he thought of the thin line between fear and judgment and how he had crossed it. In the quiet that followed, with engines idling and hoses coiled, a new bond formed between a firefighter and a cop. They had faced fires both real and imagined, and emerged stronger together. And though the night held darkness, they carried a spark of hope and the promise of understanding to light the path forward. The roar of flames had driven deeper into the heart of Officer Blake's home by the time the crew returned from the initial sweep. Marcus Ellis sat in the engine's cab, wiping sweat and soot from his face with the back of his gloved hand. Inside the cab, The radio crackled with dispatched traffic, but all Marcus could think about was the widening glow behind the house next door. He slipped his helmet off and set it on the seat beside him. "Captain, the left wall looks weak," Jenna called from the back. She knelt beside the house's side, prodding a scorch-marked beam with her boot. This could cave in without warning. Marcus popped open the passenger door and climbed down, his long legs moving with practiced ease. He bent beside Jenna and studied the beam. The wood had blackened and cracked. Water from the last attack hissed on contact. "Get us another hand line over here," Marcus said. He pointed across the yard. A fresh hose hissed as it uncoiled, and 2 firefighters hurried to drag it into position. Marcus snapped the coupling onto the nozzle, then lifted it like a field manual. The hose gurgled to life, and a steady spray of water arced toward the burning shingles near the roof. Each burst of water released a plume of steam that momentarily hid the flames before revealing them again. From his corner of the yard, Officer Blake watched in silence. He crouched low, his radio clipped to his chest. His uniform was stained with ash and water, but he made no move to return to his cruiser. Blake felt a mixture of shame and relief. Shame over the gun he had pointed at Marcus earlier. Relief that Marcus had not held a grudge and was now leading the fight to save Blake's home. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. As Marcus guided the water stream, he called out, "Keep it steady! Let me know if it spreads to the eaves." Behind him, Jenna and 2 other firefighters moved carefully, checking windows and doors for hidden fires. The wind gusted, pushing smoke across the yard toward Blake. He shifted to stay out of the billowing cloud. He thought of Clara upstairs, unaware of the danger creeping in the walls above her head. The thought drove him forward. Blake approached Marcus, helmet in hand. "Can I help?" he asked, voice rough. Marcus turned, surprised by the offer. He measured Blake with a steady glance. Then he nodded. "Hand me that thermal camera," he said, pointing to a small device hanging on a nearby hook. Blake grabbed it and passed it over. Marcus flipped it on. The display glowed bright, showing hot spots in red and yellow. He swept it along the exterior wall. "There, can you see that?" Marcus pointed to a section of siding just below the attic vent. A bright red patch indicated heat just behind the boards. "Water there," Marcus said. Blake aimed the hose nozzle where Marcus pointed. The water hissed, and the red patch dimmed to orange. Marcus nodded in approval. "Good," he said. "Now sweep it again." Blake moved the nozzle slowly, following Marcus's guidance. Each time the camera beeped, Blake soaked the spot until the display turned blue, indicating it was safe. A sense of pride washed through him. He realized that Marcus was teaching him, not scolding him for the earlier mistake. He felt grateful and determined to learn everything he could. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from above. Blake and Marcus looked up. A steel gutter ripped loose and crashed onto the porch roof, its bolts melted by the heat. The sound was like thunder. Marcus ducked instinctively. Blake's heart lurched. He took a step back, but Marcus waved him forward. "Stay calm, Marcus," said. "We knew this could happen." Marcus tapped Jenna on the shoulder. "Get the ladder truck here," he said. "We need to get up top and vent that roof before it collapses." Jenna radioed dispatch while Marcus climbed onto the porch roof. The deck boards were warped and soft under his boots. He moved carefully, flashlight in one hand and thermal camera in the other. Blake watched from below. Within minutes, the ladder truck pulled up. 2 firefighters balanced on the extended ladder, lowering themselves onto the roof beside Marcus. They set to work cutting a ventilation hole to let smoke and heat escape. Once the hole was open, they trained a stream of water into it, dousing embers that glowed in the attic. Marcus directed the attack, shouting guidance to his teammates. Back on the ground, Blake checked the backyard perimeter for stray embers. He found a smoldering patch in a flower bed minutes before it could catch. He grabbed his extinguisher and sprayed it until the last red glow turned to ash. He looked up at Marcus on the roof and felt a surge of respect. This was more than a job. They were protecting homes and lives together. As the sky darkened to navy blue, the flames began to retreat under the continuous water attack. The ladder crew climbed down, and Marcus joined Blake on the porch. The 2 men stood side by sighed, breathing heavily, surveying the damage. The house's front was charred but standing. The roof over the living room was now vented and cooled. The worst of the fire had been pushed back. Jenna approached with a clipboard. She checked off items on the list. No active flames. No hot spots. Structural integrity holding. Looked at Marcus and Blake with relief. Safe, she said. We can call it out. Marcus nodded and radioed dispatch. Soon the engines eased away. Hoses wound up and the fire scene crew packed up their gear. Blake watched the hoses vanish and felt a strange, quiet settle. He turned to Marcus, who stood brushing soot from his coat. Blake's chest felt tight. He knew there would be a report. There would be questions. He was ready. He would tell the truth. He would admit his error and explain what had led him to fear Marcus earlier. Marcus looked at Blake, waiting. The weight of the moment pressed in, but Marcus stayed calm. He remembered Blake's apology and his willingness to help. Now was the time to show that second chances could heal. Blake swallowed and said, "Marcus, I'm sorry again. I never thought I'd point a gun at someone just because of how they look. You showed me what real service means." He paused, searching Marcus's face. "I want to be better. I promise you, I'll face my own fears from now on." Marcus's stern expression softened into a small, understanding smile. He reached out and clasped Blake's arm. "I accept your apology," Marcus said. "This job, these streets, they need both of us. Trust takes time, but today was a start." He patted Blake's shoulder. "Let's go finish our reports and head home." Clara must be worried. Blake nodded. He pulled his radio back on and called for an escort to the station. Walking down the driveway side by side, Blake and Marcus passed neighbors who now offered thanks instead of fear. A young girl waved timidly. A man held out his hand. Blake shook it, feeling the warmth of community replace the chill of distrust. At the edge of the street, the two men paused. Marcus lifted his helmet, clearing it of soot. Blake tapped the badge on his chest. For a long moment, they simply stood. Two public servants bound by an unexpected trial, and Marcus spoke softly. "We'll talk more at the station. There's always room for conversation." Blake nodded, a hopeful light in his eyes. They climbed into their respective vehicles, Marcus into the fire engine. Blake into his cruiser and drove toward the station under the glow of streetlights. The sirens were silent now, replaced by the hum of engines and the soft promise of a fresh day, though the night had been long and the danger great. Both men felt something new, a shared commitment to protect every neighbor, no matter the color of their skin. In the quiet of his cruiser, Blake reached for his notebook and began writing. "Today I learned that courage is more than weapons. It's standing beside those you once feared and fighting side by side." As he finished the sentence, he felt resolve fill him. He would carry this lesson forward, becoming not just a better officer, but a better person. And somewhere behind him, the fire station's lights welcomed him home, a place where trust and bravery could grow together, lighting even the darkest nights. Marcus Ellis stepped out of the fire engine with his coat draped over his arm. The station's lights glowed softly in the early morning dark. He felt the weight of the last hours, his uniform still stained with soot, his boots wet from the hoses, and his body tired from fighting to fires. And inside him burned a quiet pride. He had done his job, and more than that, he had helped bridge a gap between two men and a community. Inside the station, other firefighters moved about, cleaning gear and sipping hot coffee. Jenna spotted Marcus and waved. He waved back, then headed toward the locker room. He paused by his locker and opened it. Inside lay a photo of his wife, Clara, and their golden retriever, Sunny. He touched the frame lightly. Clara's warm smile seemed to brighten the station's gray walls. He felt a pang of longing. She must have been waiting up late, worried about the fires. Marcus changed out of his heavy coat and protective pants. He peeled off his gloves and set his helmet on the shelf. The clang of metal echoed in the locker room. He ran a hand through his damp hair and took a breath. The silence there felt different than the loud roar of flames. It gave him room to think. From the hallway, he heard footsteps. It was Officer Aaron Blake, walking slowly in his uniform. Blake paused at the door, watching Marcus change clothes. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two men who had faced danger side by side. Then Blake cleared his throat. "Morning," Blake said quietly. His voice sounded tired but sincere. "I wanted to thank you again for everything you did last night, for saving my neighbors and my home, and for helping me see my mistake." Marcus turned and nodded. He reached for a clean shirt. "It was a team effort," he said. "We all did what we had to do." Blake folded his arms. "I know. But I want you to know I'm changing things. I've signed up for community outreach. I'm going to talk with people in town about what happened." He paused, looking at Marcus with respect. "I hope we can work together in the future on training, on safety, on trust." Marcus smiled. "I'd like that," he said. He buttoned his shirt. "We have a joint safety drill next month. The chief said you'd be there." Blake nodded, relief and anticipation in his eyes. "Good," Blake replied. "I'll see you then." He turned to leave, but paused. "Marcus," he said softly. Marcus looked up. "Your report, if you need anything, let me know." I'll back you up." Marcus felt a warmth in his chest. "Thanks, Aaron," he said. Blake gave a short nod and walked away. Marcus watched him go, thinking of how far they had come from a gun pointed at his back to an offer of support and friendship. He closed his locker and headed into the main bay. Outside, the sun was cresting the horizon, painting the sky in pink and gold. The fire trucks stood in neat rows, their chrome gleaming. Marcus walked to the first engine where Captain Reynolds was counting gear on the truck's bumper. The captain looked up and nodded at Marcus. "Good work, Reynolds," said. He tapped the truck's side. "We cleaned up Elm Street fast, and Blake's place too." "You kept your head when it mattered?" Marcus shrugged. "Just did my job," he said. Reynolds smiled. "Come on, let's get cleaned up and head to the phones. We have a town meeting tonight." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "A town meeting?" Listened as Captain Reynolds explained that the mayor had called for a community gathering at the town hall. They would invite firefighters, police officers, and neighbors to talk about safety and trust. Marcus realized this would be his chance to speak about what had happened, to share his side of the story, and to help heal the community's wounds. Later that day, Marcus washed up and ate a quick lunch in the station kitchen, sandwiches and fruit. He thought of how the events of the night had changed him. He had always known that his work as a firefighter went beyond fighting fires. It was about service, compassion, and teaching others about safety. Now he would add another lesson, teaching people to look past fear and bias, to see the person under the gear, whether wearing a badge or a helmet, across town. Officer Blake sat at his desk, typing notes into his report. He wrote about the fire, its cause, and the teamwork that had saved 2 homes. He also included an honest account of why he had drawn his weapon, how fear and prejudice had clouded his judgment, and how Marcus's calm words had brought him back. He sent the report to his superiors, knowing that honesty was the first step to real change. That evening, 6 o'clock, Marcus and Blake arrived separately at the town hall. Rows of folding chairs filled the community center's gym. Crews set up cameras, and posters read Brookside, "Together we stand." Neighbors filled the seats, families who had watched the fire, people who had recorded the shooting standoff on their phones, and others who had marched in silence, unsure what to believe. Marcus stood near the front with Captain Reynolds. Blake stood beside Chief Rodriguez from the police department. The room buzzed with nervous energy. The mayor, a tall woman with kind eyes, stepped to the podium. She welcomed everyone and spoke about unity. She thanked the firefighters and police officers for their service. Then she said, "Tonight we hear from those directly involved. We hope to learn, to talk, and to build trust." First, Chief Rodriguez spoke. He praised both departments and announced joint training sessions. He emphasized that mistakes happen, but owning up to them and learning from them was what made them professionals. Then Captain Reynolds introduced Marcus. Marcus stepped forward, his heart beating fast, but his voice steady. He spoke about that night, the alarm call, the first fire, and how he had never expected a gun pointed at him. He described the fear he had felt, standing in smoke with his hands up, and the confusion when he learned it was one of his own first responder colleagues. Aiming at him, he explained how they had overcome that moment, how calm words and teamwork had saved 2 homes, and how he hoped that everyone in the room could learn to see beyond color and gear. When Marcus finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then a neighbor stood up and said, "Thank you, Marcus. I'm sorry we judged you before knowing who you were." Others nodded. A police officer in the back raised his hand and said, "I've been on that other side. I saw the video, and I felt that tension. Thank you for your words." Marcus felt the weight of their thanks, and he nodded gratefully. Next, Officer Blake took the podium. He spoke about the fear he had felt when he saw Marcus in the smoke, and how he had let his own bias guide his actions. He apologized to Marcus, to his community, and to anyone who felt unsafe because of his mistake. He announced new outreach programs where officers and firefighters would visit schools, hold open house days at the station and precinct, and talk to residents about safety and trust. By the end of the meeting, tears and laughs filled the room. People from different backgrounds spoke about how they could work together, neighbors volunteering to clear brush, teachers inviting first responders to classrooms, and families pledging to treat each other with dignity and respect. Afterward, Marcus and Blake found a quiet hallway. Each held a coffee cup. They stood side by side, looking at a bulletin board filled with thank you notes and posters for joint drills. Marcus took a sip of coffee. "You did good up there," Marcus said. Blake smiled, relieved. "You too." Blake replied, "I couldn't have done it without you." They shook hands, firm and trusting. Then Blake added, "How about breakfast tomorrow? My treat. We can plan for that drill." Marcus laughed. "Sounds good," he said. "But I'm bringing pancakes." Blake's eyes lit up. "Deal," he said, as they walked out of the town hall into the night air. The streetlights illuminated their path. They were 2 men whose lives had collided in fire and fear, but who now walked forward together, ready to serve and protect every member of their community. And though the road ahead would have challenges, they knew that trust once ignited could burn brighter than any fire, guiding them toward a safer, kinder Brookside.